Hello. Um, well, considering I have the word suicide in the title, um, I'm assuming you don't need any trigger warnings, but I'm going to give them anyway. Um, well, let me just preface by saying this will be a positive video in the end. Um, However, this video will involve graphic details of attempted suicide, um, and a lot of explanation of what passive suicidal ideation has been in my life. Um, so, yes, if you're not ready for that, it is time to click off the video. And I'll put words and stuff at the beginning as well. Um, but yeah, no, think about whether or not you want to be here. Like I said, it'll be good in the end. But until we get there, I don't know, might be some bad stuff. So I'll drink my tea while you decide. Oh, that's good tea. It's phenomenal. What am I drinking? Brownie Batter by Tiesta Teas. It's wonderful. Um, mm. But that's not what you're here for. So yes, again, I'm assuming you're here because you searched it. Somebody sent this to you, or you happen to know me. Because you can't find this video unless you search for it, or you're going through my old videos. But again, it's in the title. So again, please watch your mental health. It's very important. Because I am going to start in 5, 4. I'm just going to minimize that so I'm not looking at myself the whole time. Hello. So, at this point, most of my life dealing with passive suicidal ideations started with not so passive suicidal ideations. And I'll get into what passive suicidal ideation means, at least for me in my life. So I don't remember exactly when the first time suicide came into my mind as an option. I know it was around middle school. But again, also at this time, I don't know if perhaps it was the friends I had. Some girls I dated had histories of self-harm. Um, the idea of suicide wasn't uncommon for in some of my groups of friends. Though at the time it seemed more like attention seeking from some of them. But again, I don't know. I can't know what was going on in their minds and hearts. But these things weren't uncommon. Or tales of self-harm were not uncommon. Yeah, I think that's, yeah. So I didn't realize that it wasn't a normal thing, for at least for the idea to come into your head, which goes into my passive suicidal ideations. But what I do know is that when the idea of suicide first entered my head, well, seriously, that I can remember would be my one and only suicide attempt, which was in 8th grade. I'm not sure exactly how old you are in 8th grade, Um, but a lot was going on. Um, I know now that I had already been in a deep depression. Especially by eighth grade, I was on average missing at least 2 days of school a week. My first period class, I didn't go to for 3 months straight. And I knew the teacher had to have known. I would just dodge her. But a lot of times when I was missing school, I wasn't out having fun. I just wanted to sleep all the time. Um, and I could because I was home alone, um, to fend for myself pretty much all the time. I think at this point, my mom was working. Um, she was driving a taxi, and she would only come home maybe 2 or 3 days a week. So the rest of the time, I was by myself because she had to work. Um, and when she was home, unfortunately, at the time, and we've talked about this, our relationship is terrific now, and we're working because we've worked on it, and we continue to work on it. Um, but back then, it was just us. I think my uncle was with us at the time, but he was young and in and out. Um, so yes, she was severely mentally ill at the time. She had very deep depression, and I believe she's bipolar. Um, but it was very untreated at the time. And when you're a kid and you don't really understand these things, I didn't know what was going on at the time. I just knew I felt alone. No father and a mentally unwell mother. Um, and unfortunately, because of her upbringing and all the things that she went through that I could never even imagine going through, um, it severely affected her ability to show me any kind of love or affection. Again, now it's completely different. Then, um, yeah, there was none. And again, she was, angry all the time, um, because she was a single mother with severe mental health issues. And I honestly don't know how she kept a roof over her head and kept going. I don't think I could have done the same in her position. And all this is to say that I'm not putting any blame on her. Whatever blame I might put, it's completely on her mental illness at the time, which again, she's working on. She's doing amazing. She's a huge inspiration to me. Um, but again, at the time, that's not what I felt. Um, and a lot of stuff was going on outside of that and the usual teenage stuff. And again, I had untreated depression and anxiety that I had no idea about. Um, because again, I just wanted to sleep. I had no energy ever. I just no motivation to do anything. I just thought I was, I don't know, unmotivated. Um, but it turns out that when you're a teenager, it's not really normal to just want to sleep. And on average, sleep 14 to 16 hours at a time. Um, but yeah, I just wasn't doing anything, and it led to me. And eventually, um, I decided that the best course of action was to end my own life. Um, because again, this was not an uncommon um, topic um, for my friends at the time. Some of them. Um, so in eighth grade, um, when I decided that I was going to, well, I think I tried a couple other ways that involved cutting off air supply, but that didn't work out. Uh, um, I think at one, yeah, that part isn't important. And the only reason I'm going to go into detail about the actual attempt um, is because it's for a very good reason. Um, so when I decided to end my life in eighth grade, I decided that it was going to be in the bathtub, and I got an extension cord and got my boombox. Um, and ran the extension cord, with the boombox and placed it on the edge of the bathtub. Um, and this is something I think outside of mental health professionals, um, I'm not sure who really knows this story. I've told people about me getting electrocuted. I've told the story many times, but didn't mention that. I made it funny because again, it did. Well, I made it funny because that was just the way that I dealt with things, and probably that was part of me wanting to talk about it in some sort of way, but by making it funny. 'Cause in the story, I told people I just tripped and fell. But it's just a story about the time I got electrocuted. Um, but in reality, I put the boombox on the edge of the tub. And I don't know how long I sat in the tub. Um, don't know what music was playing. I imagine at the time I was already very much into jazz. So I don't know. Not that it matters, but I have thought about that quite a bit. I don't know. I wish I would know. No, it doesn't. Not important. What is important is when I did finally decide to push the boombox into the water. Um, and again, this is why it's so important. Um, because something happened as soon as I pushed that boombox into the water. Um, this depression is kind of like a cold blanket that just lays on top of you, like a weighted blanket that you've had on for so long that you don't even realize it's there. It almost feels like you're just walking through a fog. Which again are very, I don't know, there's, I'm sure, a good word for it. And eventually I'll write these down and have a much better format. Um, but all of those feelings were very vague. Something I couldn't really touch. It was just something just ever present. But as soon as that boombox fell in the water, and I got lucky, so I knocked it in and it fell onto the front. And you don't know, most of this boombox in particular, the power cord was plugged into the back. So as soon as the boombox fell in, it was like slow motion. Everything slowed down. Um, and in that split second, as soon as it hit the water, every fiber of my being said, "You don't want to do this. You want to live." And that feeling was the most real feeling. I still remember I didn't want to die. And that feeling was a million times more powerful than the dread and doom and the insignificance that I had been feeling. That desire to live. And it was like slow motion. Like I was just watching, like it fell in on the speakers and it slowly was rotating towards to the back where it was actually plugged in. And I've never moved. I don't think I've ever moved so fast in my life. And I was just a naked mess, scrambling to get out of this bathtub as I'm watching. Well, because again, I didn't know why I wasn't electrocuted at the time, but I was just watching it slowly go. And I was almost out when it finally hit. The power hit the water. My right arm was still in. I was pushing myself up, and I got electrocuted. If you've never been electrocuted, it's um, it's like, or like a massage machine, but it goes up your entire body. And luckily, like I said, it was more up here, and luckily, the building was very old. And I'm assuming the wiring wasn't great. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know enough about electricity to know how much danger I was in, or if I was in super danger. I don't know. But what I do know is that, well, obviously I survived because I'm still here, unless this is one of those movies where I find out I'm dead at the end. Um, Hopefully not. Probably not, because I don't think dead people have heart attacks, and I had a bunch of those last month. We'll get into that. I think I have a lot of that had to do with my undiagnosed and untreated until a few years ago anxiety and depression, and the constant passive suicidal ideations. Um, so again, yeah. So I got out. And in all the commotion, my mom heard, and I ended up having to lie and said I couldn't talk. Well, I told, I had, I think I wrote down that I got electrocuted, told her it was an accident. Um, well, again, wrote it down because I couldn't talk. Well, I could talk, but I couldn't muster the words to explain what I had just gone through. Um, I didn't want to. I didn't want to tell anybody what I had done. I was ashamed, um, that I would ever, and especially because up to that point, like I I know I was thinking about what it would do to my family. um I'm assuming, I really don't know, to be honest. um but it didn't happen. um and I know, starting, I guess, well, probably a little bit after that, um is when my passive suicidal ideations started. um which we get, so passive suicidal ideations, for me, um, so the idea of suicide would constantly come into my head, but not an intentional thought, not because anything was going wrong most of the time. Um, it was literally um, just a thought that would pop in. Almost like I could just literally be thinking about anything, like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do laundry, or I can just kill myself. It always felt like somebody else's voice, and I would always instantly say, no, stop it. Um, because again, I remembered that time and that feeling of every cell in my body rebelling against what I was doing. Um, and the fact that I knew I wanted to live. So whenever those thoughts would pop into my head, it was usually easy, just stop it. Um, no. And then I would just keep on going with what I was doing. But I know in high school, it wasn't that often. I think usually something would have to be going awry. Um, it wasn't as common as it was when I got into my late teens, 19, 20, 21. I think is when it started. By 21, I think the passives started to be a daily occurrence. Um, and that's about the time where I started to measure my level of mental health by how many passive suicidal ideations I would have in a given day. One or two or three, beautiful. That meant that meant I was doing pretty good. And I described it in my, once I finally started talking to mental health professionals, I described it kind of like a fly in the room. Um, where on good days, the fly would just buzz around my face once, and I could just shoo fly, get that thought out of here. Because it would just pop up out of nowhere. I could be doing anything. And the thought, and again, it was the period on errant thoughts. Did I use that word right? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Uh, you got it. You're smart. It was, yeah. But those were the good days. The bad days were the days where I couldn't make the voice stop. Um, and again, I never lost that feeling, um, from that attempt. So no matter how loud the voice got, it was never as powerful as that feeling that I knew I wanted to live. Um, that's what I held on to. But again, up until my mid 20s, something had to be really going on, usually, for the voice to stick around. And I think it wasn't until, yeah, probably about my mid 20s when I really got into ecstasy for about 2 years. Um, and what's funny about the ecstasy is, I was still very much an alcoholic. Because, yeah, I became an alcoholic by the time I was 19. I was drinking every day. That's another video. Um, yes. After, yeah, about 2 years of ecstasy, um, and I heavily abused ecstasy. Um, and it got to the point where it wasn't that I didn't like the high. It was that every time I would do it, it seemed like when I wasn't on ecstasy, I couldn't achieve the level of happiness and calm. Like each time I did ecstasy, um, when I wasn't on it, it seemed like it was just a sliver less happiness that I was able to achieve. And the darker my thoughts got. And it's to the point I have no desire. Cause it got to the point where my depression was just, it would, the high would be one night and I would sink into what felt like bottomless depressions, for days at a time afterwards. Which I know now probably because now what I know about dopamine. So, because again, by this time had already been an alcoholic for 7 years, drinking daily, hard liquor, and not a small amount. I would finish a handle in about 2 or 3 days, which already was affecting my dopamine levels severely. Again, from when I've seen the brain scans, it's not a good thing if you're using substances daily, and you don't feel that happy. You don't think that you'll ever be able to achieve it. Yeah, it's probably because it's your dopamine is all screwed up. It took me about a year before it to really start, really come back. Or stop, a year of not drinking, which is a little scary just to hear. But oh, I can't explain the level of happiness and calm that I achieve daily now. But we're going to get into that. That's what I said. Ultimately, this is a happy video, but we got to trudge through some mud to get there. But so is life. Where was I? Yes, ecstasy. Yeah, so by the time I had finished my fun with ecstasy, I never thought, by this point, I think I stopped being able to laugh unless I was drinking. I felt nothing if I wasn't drinking. I was going to say, I don't know if that was the case before then. Not as much, but even before the ecstasy, if I wasn't working, I was drinking. Full stop. There was no, nobody from the time I was 19 till 3 years ago. If you saw me and I wasn't working, I was drinking. Even if you didn't see anything in my hand, if I had a water bottle, that was probably vodka. And I was a very put together drunk, for the most part. People didn't know how much I drank. I wasn't the crazy one. Even though I drank twice as much as most of my friends, I would usually still be the one taking care of people, because I was good at hiding it. And I was just the caretaker. That was the role that I had growing up, and it's just natural for me. And again, mainly raising myself because, again, a single mother who had to keep food and a roof over our head. food in my stomach and a roof over our head. Um, yeah, I did everything for myself. This is what I was used to, um, which also led me to not want to be a burden to anybody, um, which is one of the main reasons it took so long for me to ask for help. Um, and the times I did, I had to be in a very, very bad place, which I was when I came up to Portland, um, during COVID, uh, towards the end of 2020. Because again, if I wasn't working, I was drinking. And when COVID happened, I parked my car. I thought it was just going to be a few weeks because I drove for a living at the time. Um, and a few weeks, well, we all know, turned into months, um, which meant I didn't have breaks from drinking anymore. Um, it was constant. And the voices became constant as well. Um, and again, that's even during all that, they were still passive because I had no plans. No serious plans. But in those times, they weren't so passive. But again, only because I just couldn't get the idea out of my head as much as I tried. I couldn't. Um, and I was afraid. I was very afraid. Because again, I didn't want to. I could never do that to my family, to the people that cared about me. I mean, even the people that didn't, like, because I would always think somebody was going to have to find me. Somebody's going to have to clean up whatever was going on. I didn't want my last act to be to bring hardship and pain to others, which kept me going for the most part. But um, but when you hear a voice telling you to do something, um, over and over again, when it's the first thought that you have when you wake up, when it's ringing in your head as you're passing out from all the alcohol, um, I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to um, resist. I was afraid, um, which led me to reaching out for help. Because I have an amazing family. And my aunt came down to LA and got me and brought me up to Portland, where I still reside. Um, and even that first year, again, yeah, when I came up, I thought, getting out of that situation, maybe that would help me stop with the drinking or help with my mental health. The change of scenery. Um, and it helped a little bit at first. But very little really changed. I still drink to excess every day. Um, but again, nobody knew how much because I was always very well put together. Um, sure, they saw that I was drinking, but that we were all drinking. A few beers. Maybe one or two drinks at the bar. But again, of course, they didn't realize that my water bottle was actually vodka. And every time we had get-togethers or we were drinking at the house, I would be going up to my room, at least 2 or 3 times an hour to, you know, take drink as much as I could while I was upstairs just to keep going. I was like, oh, well, Alex hasn't drank much because again, they didn't know that I had bottles hidden all over my room. Which that was fun just coming up to Portland because I had to go through. Well, yeah, that was fun. Oh God, yeah. I can't tell you how many hours I spent just pulling out empty bottles, and it just seemed they would just be everywhere. Like until like I would just run out of room, and then I would have to pile them all up and then wait for the trash day and then sneak them out so nobody would know exactly how much I was drinking. Oh, and then yeah, when I was staying with my aunt and uncle when I first came up here, yeah, no, that was fun. Waiting for them to go and then piling up all my empty vodka bottles. And yeah, I had about 3 or 4 trash cans around town that I would just go and uh, discard my shame, as it were. Um, yeah, so, but, I kept my head above ground for a couple years um, when I came up here. But again, I didn't ask for help in the ways that I needed to. Um, and again, I was always trying to hide how much I drank, which is why the most dangerous times were when I was alone and I didn't have to hide. And I was staying with my aunt and uncle, renting a room from them, and they travel a lot. Um, and those are the days that I knew I was probably going to call out from work for 2, 3, 4 days at a time if they were gone, um, because those are the times I didn't have to hide how much I was drinking, um, how depressed I was, how certain thoughts I couldn't escape from. 'Cause yes, by this time, yeah, it was I said on average, my passive suicidal ideations would probably happen at least 5 or 10 times a day. Um, 'Cause those were on good days. At this point, um, bad days again, it was just constant. Um, and then on one of those instances, found myself in the same position. Um, where they were gone, I think, for 2 weeks. And I was up there in the woods by myself, not having to hide. I think at this point I had missed a week and a half of work. Um, Luckily, this job was very lax. Um, but better than going to work drunk, I guess. Which, yeah, no, I wasn't going to do. Um, but I was so sick all the time. I could barely get out of bed on these are the times where um yeah, waking up just, crawling to the bathroom just to throw up, um face red and blotchy. I looked like a ghoul. I'm sure. Skin peeling. I don't know what that was about. All the time. I just looked like like I had a face mask on at all times. Um, where I would just wake up, drink, could barely get out of bed. Um, Maybe be able to force some soup down, throw it up, drink some more, pass out. Watch true crime. Yeah, that was a big thing as I uh, fixated on death, I think. Um, oh, yeah. Yeah, well, and also, yeah, I should mention that by the time I was 25, I decided that I was going to drink myself to death. Because I couldn't stop. I had already tried many times. The longest I was ever able to go was 3 days without drinking. Um, so that was my plan, was to outlive my grandmother and my mother, and I figured I would just drink myself to death. Um, that was my plan for 10 years of my life. Um, and everything just revolved around just keeping me alive barely enough to outlive them. Because I wasn't going to kill myself outright. Obviously, I was trying to, just very slowly. Um, but I figured, hey, that's nobody would feel responsible. My mom, again, I didn't want them to have to bury me, my mother and my grandmother. So that was my life's goal, was to outlive them and drink myself to death. So when people talk about mortgages, retirement, mortgages, I think I just said that. But all these marriage, kids, these weren't things that I thought were for me. Um, I just needed to get through the day alive, make enough money that I could eat and drink, and everything else. Oh, and smoke cigarettes too. Yeah, I was doing a lot of that. Yep, cigarette. And there's a lot of times I bought cigarettes instead of actually buying food. Cigarettes and alcohol came first, and then whatever else I had left. Um, yes. So again, on one of these moments, one of these times where they were gone for 2 or 3 weeks, and again, I didn't have to hide it. Um, and it got to the point where again, I couldn't make the voices go away. Um, and at least the time before that, I had other people in the house. This time, I was up in a house in the middle of the woods where the closest neighbor was 2 acres away. Um, and I was afraid. I didn't. And it got to the, even just with the drinking, like it got to the like my insides were so swollen that I couldn't even sleep on my side. It was so painful. Um, and I thought I was, even if I didn't do it myself, I just couldn't stop drinking. And I just thought I was gonna die from that because I would just wake up and throw up and drink. Um, and then every once in a while, if I could drag myself down the stairs, I don't even know what I was able to eat. Probably a top ramen or yeah, noodles. I think was my go-to. It was just easier to keep down. Um, but I was afraid that I wasn't going to make it. And it led to me finally calling the suicide hotline. But even that, and again, this is just a random person on the thing, but even then, I didn't feel worthy enough to even make that call. I think I called probably 5 or 6 times and hung up. Um, I think like the first 3 times it would start ringing and I would hang up as soon as it would start ringing. Um, and build up the courage to call again. I think maybe by the fourth or fifth time, I actually waited till somebody picked up, and then I would hang up, until finally I stayed on the line, um, which that call saved my life. There's still a lot of struggles afterwards, but the woman who, well, I'm assuming, I don't know there. Um, yeah, she stayed on the phone with me for I think 2.5 hours. Um, um, and it was that's right. It was one of the only nights that my aunt um, was coming back for work. I think she had like a 2-day thing. Um, she was coming back that night, which I think is one of the reasons I had to call because I didn't know what she was going to walk in on. Um, but she stayed on the phone with me and she convinced me to send a text to my aunt because I told her about how long I'd been struggling and how hard it was for me to ask for help. And again, I didn't want to be a burden, so I suffered silently. Um, and she convinced me to send a text to her because I was very candid with her that there was a good chance that I would just play it off like nothing was going on, like I usually did. Um, and I'm glad I took her advice, um, because that night I had a very long conversation with my aunt, as well as my who would end up being my godmother, um, who I'd known since second grade. Her son is one of my best friends. Um, so yes, she talked me through it before my aunt got there, and then my aunt got there, and I told her what was going on. But I couldn't get these thoughts out of my head. Um, how scared I was. How much I was drinking, but I think I played that down because I didn't. I didn't want to do anything about that yet at the time. Um, but just from that, I ended up starting to see a psychiatrist who prescribed me Prozac, well, fluoxetine, which is generic for Prozac. Um, and luckily, a lot of people that start antidepressants, I've heard some horror stories about finding the right dosage, the right antidepressant. Fluoxetine knocked it out the fucking freaking. I'm sorry, Grandma. Um, hopefully you're not watching this one. Um, though I don't know, you might. We've had my grandmother is amazing, and we've talked some about this because um, there has been successful suicide attempts in my family, which for black families is very rare, especially for when it happened. I won't get into too much because it's not my story to tell. Um, but um, yes, I the fluoxetine. I still remember it. Um, to the or well, it's not like it was that long ago, but just the feeling. Because again, for years and years and years, at this point, it had been almost a decade. Um, that I didn't feel anything unless I was drinking. Um, and of course, when you're drinking, I'm feeling all these things of joy and jovial and um, but again, it was artificial. And there was still that shame and all these things going on again because I was hiding my drinking and doing all these things. And um, so it wasn't a real joy or happiness with the drinking. It was a cheap imitation. I know that now. I didn't at the time because it was the only way I could feel anything. Um, but yeah, within a week and a half of taking the fluoxetine, I'm up in in my break room just eating my cup of noodles. Um, and all of a sudden I just felt happiness. It was small, um, but it was I describe it kind of like a Disney movie. Like, what's this? What's this? There's something in the air. That's what it was a shock. Because again, I wasn't drinking. I was upset. Just something mundane, like just enjoying a good. It was just a good meal at lunchtime, and I just felt happy about it, which was so odd to me. Um, and then that just started this whole journey to try to chasing that happiness. But I thought that um, once I got my mental health that the drinking would follow, but that's not how it worked, unfortunately. I started to get happier, started to make a lot of improvements, but I was still drinking every day. Um, and I couldn't stop. Still, but I was still getting better mentally. Um, and the way I kind of describe it is kind of like a car that just won't start, when it's still, boom, 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 like, but it won't just turn over. Like that's what it felt like. Like I was always just on the cusp of like just feeling this real happiness and joy and like all these things that I hadn't felt in years. Like I said, almost a decade at this point, probably over a decade at this point. Um, but it wasn't quite there. Like I could almost feel it. Um, but I knew like it I couldn't get there as long as I was drinking. And then I um, finally sent a letter or an email, text, a long one to my god. Well, again, she wasn't my godmother at the time, but she was instrumental in me building up my mental health. My madrina, which I call her now. I asked her to be my godmother, um, which she accepted. Um, yeah, so I can't I sent an email to her telling her all about my drinking and how much I drank and how I had to hide it. Um, and that same day, she got me on the phone with rehab. I didn't think I needed rehab. I drink every day. Well, I know I could get through this, but I told her what was going on, and she thought it was a good idea, and she was very right. Uh, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Um, and those are going to be whole separate videos. Um, but through rehab, um, I learned meditation practice. Um, I learned self respect. I learned to stop beating myself up. A whole lot of things that would eventually lead to me being able to help myself with my suicidal ideations. Because again, this is also mandatory that I see a psychiatrist there, and a therapist and a counselor, and they took a big interest in me. I had a very great staff at Hazelton, Betty Ford, um, and the people that I was there with helped me tremendously. Um, um, but but also just with the alcohol. Well, and unfortunately, I had a few days before my 6 months clean, I started to relapse. Um, and that's actually my first video on here, was towards the end of a whole long series of relapses. Oh yeah, that's right. I don't even have to explain that. Just go watch the video. Yes, I love this. I can just tell you, just watch the video. I'm not explaining this crap anymore. uh, but yeah, those I figured that, with the drinking, the suicidal ideations, passive suicidal ideations would stop. Um, and they have, for the most part. Well, again, once I got better, but it's been, there were times, especially in the relapse, that, yeah, it just went right back dark. But again, yeah, now I am over a year since my last drink. I've done an amazing job, with where I am. But again, it was a lot of work. Um, a lot of work. It didn't happen by chance. Um, and every day is work, but it's worth doing. And I've gotten so much. I've never ever had um, such a gain, um, from my work. There's a better phrase for that, but anyway. Um, and unfortunately, with the suicidal ideations, that's one thing that I've had to come to deal with. Because would you imagine that, or now I can go weeks without the thought ever passing my into my brain, which, just a year ago, again, one or two times a day was great for me. That meant, oh, that was beautiful. Um, Now I can go weeks. Um, but again, it's been a lot of work and a lot of learning about myself. Um, and a lot of it is just coming to accept, like, these suicidal ideations. Everything can be going fine and they can just pop up out of nowhere. Um, and even that, like, I think the first couple weeks, like the first time I had gone a couple weeks without them happening, and I'm like, it's over. Um, they're gone. Um, until they weren't. And then that, you know, threw me for a loop for a while. Um, realizing that I'm probably in some way, shape, or form going to have to be dealing with this for the rest of my life. That sometimes that these thoughts and feelings will just pop up out of nowhere. Though now, because of all the work that I've been doing, understanding myself, and what I need and boundaries, and I mean, even just, one of the biggest, um, the fastest way for them to come back is if I don't get enough sleep. That's an instant. If I go 2 or 3 days without getting enough sleep, almost guaranteed they're going to come back. But knowing that is a beautiful thing, because that means I am very adamant about getting enough sleep, getting enough rest. Things I didn't care about or think too much about before. Um, but I know, like, when things are going bad, when I'm not doing something that I should be doing, or doing too much of something, um, when I start having these suicidal ideations, I know that there's something I need to tweak. So in that way, it's almost become a superpower, because I know instantly when something that I'm doing isn't right. And I'm forced to course correct, or else I have to endure these thoughts, which I don't want to do. Um, so I just graduated from a year and a half of therapy, which I didn't even know you can graduate from therapy. Uh, but I did. Deandra Chambers, oh, such a G. Um, and she wasn't my first one. My first therapist, I did not like at all. Um, and then stopped seeing her and didn't look for another therapist for months and months and months. Because I didn't like my first experience. And then luckily I had no choice because again, I was relapsing. I was going to very dark places and I needed help. Um, which I learned in rehab because all those years of I was trying to do it myself and I couldn't. Um, I needed help. And it was only through help that I was able to get to where I was. But again, old habits die hard, and I was used to trying to do everything myself. Um, and I don't do that anymore. When I need help, I ask for it. When I need support, I go get it. I don't wait. But again, I can also see when things are happening because I've been paying attention. I've been doing the work. Again, going back to the therapy, I graduated because I did all the homework. And then I made my own homework. I worked my ass off because I was very motivated because I didn't want those thoughts. Because they're scary when you can't get rid of them. Again, even when you have no plans to actually do it, it's a scary thought to not be able to get out of your head. And even when you don't have plans, I mean, I wasn't going to do it, but when you start imagining how you would, but again, I haven't gotten anywhere close to that place. Because again, I've worked my ass off and I have so much work to do still and will always have work. But it's exciting for me, um, especially when I can measure my improvement. I see it daily. The people around me see it. I mean, just the way I feel and view the world and just my happiness levels. I can't even explain um, the level in peace and calm that I'm able to achieve now. But again, it didn't just come out of nowhere. It was a lot of work, um, but worth doing. And this is me doing that work right now. Um, it's like the most I've had the this passive suicidal ideations, um, really in this whole last year. One of the biggest ones was when I thought about creating this YouTube channel. Because why? Because I was so excited and I wasn't sleeping and I was doing research and doing this and yada, 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 and pushing, I got to do this and I got to do that. And I realized I was pushing myself too much. And I wasn't sleeping enough. And I was putting too much on my plate and I was um, doing all these things, which, again, at some point, I'm sure I'll be great at. Because even this, every day I'm able to do a little bit more than I was the day before. I'm able to process things better. I'm able to react to things better. Because every day I work, I find some way, some small way. And yes, it was a lot of work, but I am a lazy son of a gun. Which I will talk about because right now I feel like I've climbed a mountain. But as I look up, I see the mountain is still, I've still got a lot to climb. And the mountain will never end. The mountain goes on forever. But compared to the valley that I was in for most of my life, without even a view of the sky, I didn't even dare to dream. Where I am now, I would never have imagined, even just 2 years ago. I couldn't. There was nothing in me that would allow myself to even think it was possible. Um, but now, and how did I get here? A lot of tiny, tiny steps, tiny, tiny little minuscule steps, um, day in and day out. And before you know it, you look back, at least I have, um, at how far I've come. I would never have thought it. Um, I could never have imagined. Um, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to start this channel and why I needed to make this video. And I had a very vivid dream that I was right back. And again, it's something I have to deal with because last night my dream, they weren't passive. Last night was a doozy. Um, uh, yeah, and just like that, I was back in that mind frame. But I know it's, well, more than likely because I've been thinking about making this video for over a month now. I know I needed to make this video. If there was no other video I ever made, I knew I wanted this out to help somebody. Because I know it would. It would have helped me to hear these things. Even just the vocabulary of passive suicidal ideation. I didn't even know there was a word for what I was dealing with until I got professional help. Which again, if any of this resonates, any of this, please, I implore you, seek help. Even if you can't tell the people you love, I understand that very well. And of course, I'm sure I'm gonna leave numbers in the description. But even the suicide hotline, 2.5 hours at least, it might have been longer, that she stayed on the phone with me. And this person, of course, yeah, I'm sure you don't know who you are, but I don't know if you do anything like that, if you've helped anybody in that way. I don't know if I would be here if it wasn't for that call. I don't know if I would be here if I didn't reach out to my aunt to bring me up to Portland. I don't know if I would be here if I didn't tell my godmother what was going on and for her to help me, get me into rehab. I don't know if I would be here if I didn't finally go and find my great therapist, DeAndre Chambers. Because again, I was relapsing and I was back down and thinking those thoughts and couldn't get them out of my head. And if I hadn't been doing all this work, if I hadn't stopped drinking and smoking, I probably would not have survived my series of heart attacks I had last month. So that's why it's very important for me to make this video and to keep making videos, God willing. Because I shouldn't be here. And tomorrow is not promised. And this may be the only chance that I get. And if there's anything that I do with my life, I'll be happy if it's just to put this out there. And I'm happy I'm just finally filming. Again, this has been a month that I've been thinking about making this video. And even tonight, I started to think like, oh, well, started to give myself even more reasons. Because at work, I was like, nope, you're going to go. You got to do it. Today is the day. And then I got home and I started to make excuses on, well, maybe tomorrow. Like, oh, no, you need to shave. You don't look that great. Yada, yada, yada. But they were excuses. And luckily I was meditating earlier and I knew it was time. I needed to stop putting it off. And again, after my dream last night, I think that was my subconscious. Just hurry up and do it because it's been weighing heavy on me. But I feel a lot lighter now. Even though I probably won't feel, I don't know. Actually, no, after the first couple videos, those were hard to actually put out on the internet. This one probably won't be as hard. because again, it's a positive video on them, and again, this is a very, very serious topic on this one. Um, but it was something I needed to share. I wanted to share, um, especially as I keep making these videos and going over my journey, um, especially for people to understand exactly why I was so motivated to do as much work as I've done, and why I'm motivated to keep working, um, and why it's so important for me to use all these things, all these struggles, all the suffering that I've gone through, in an instant with these videos. It all becomes, it all, excuse me, is for something. None of it was wasted. There was no time wasted if this time can be used to help others. And that is my phone telling me that it's time to take my Berlinta, because again, I had a series of heart attacks last month. And I have to take, but this is my last day. See, the little victories. The last day I have to take this medication, which I have to take twice a day, 12 hours on the dot from each other. So I have to go like right now. But this is my last day. And then tomorrow I start a new one, which I only have to take once a day, which is beautiful. It's the little victories. Luckily I was getting ready to end anyway. So yeah. I think that's it for you. It's 9:30. It's time for me to take my heart medication. I used to say because I'm an old man, but I don't do that anymore, because that's probably why I started to go gray in high school and why I had a series of heart attacks at 36, because the things that we repeat to ourselves have power. At least they did for me. Like all the years that I called myself an idiot and a dummy and all sorts of terrible things, and I wasn't worth life. Yet I don't do that anymore. Do not do that anymore. What I do is go take my heart medication when I'm supposed to, and I make YouTube videos to hopefully help people. This will probably help at least one person, which is fine. One person's good enough. Are you that person? Maybe you can get better and help other people too. I'm just saying. Anyway, I gotta go take my medication. Get out of here, you silly goose. I need to go. Wait, I'm really talking to me. Go take your medication. I'm going. Bye.